on the activities page, there is one more action that we are doing, which is by using this select box, we have a way to select amount of time to spend on this particular activity. And once we select this time, we'll let the root component know that we have to update time for this activity, since all data mutations happen in our root component. So just like in the previous lesson, we're going to provide access to that function which is responsible for setting new time for a particular activity. So that function can be called directly from within ActivityItem component whenever we select a new time. And for now, what actually happens inside of the root component when we select the new time is basically going to assign new value to setActivitySecondsToComplete property of the particular activity object. And this new value is actually the value which was just selected. And then this whole activities array gets passed to the activities component as activities prop. And individual activity objects from this array will get passed to ActivityItem components as a prop activity. And of course, one of the activities prop is SecondsToComplete, which is used to show pre-selected value for this select box. So let's just take a closer look how it all happens in the code, starting from ActivityItem component. So in here, once we select new time by using that select box, we're gonna fire custom event setSecondsToComplete to the parent component. And as payload for this event, we're also going to send selected time. In the parent component, we will handle this event by using a local function called setSecondsToComplete, which will receive activity object for which we're about to update the time, as well as amount of time that we just selected, which is stored within special event variable. And finally, this event will be handled within the app component by function called setActivitySecondsToComplete. Let's take a look at its implementation. As we can see, there is nothing fancy going on in here. We just take amount of time selected by the select box and assign it to SecondsToComplete property of the activity object. And this is all what is required to set the time for a particular activity. And now to be able to call this function directly from the ActivityItem component, we're gonna use function provide to provide access to this function under setActivitySecondsToComplete key. And now there is no need to listen for setActivitySecondsToComplete on the activities component. So let's remove this registration. And inside of the activities component, we no longer fire event called setActivitySecondsToComplete. So there is no need to use this validation function. We're gonna remove this as well as the handler function setSecondsToComplete, which fires that custom event to parent component. We no longer listen for this event, so there is no need to fire it. As a result, isNumber function is no longer used in this component, so let's remove this import. And of course, inside of ActivityItem component, there is no need to fire setSecondsToComplete event. We will remove this registration from defining its macro. And finally, let's also remove the listener, which were firing this event before. It is this line. And just like before, isNumber function is no longer used. And now in here we're gonna access that setActivitySecondsToComplete function that we have provided access to inside of the root component. So let's assign reference to this function to constant called setActivitySecondsToComplete. Scroll down to the template, and once this event occurs, we're gonna call that function setActivitySecondsToComplete, like so. But this function also requires two arguments. First one will be an activity object for which we're updating the time, and the second argument is actually the new selected time that we are about to assign to this activity object, which we'll of course access by using special event variable. And in those times when we reset value of the select box instead of selecting new time, this event variable will get value null, so we're gonna fall back to 0 in this case, like so. And now as we can see, we are providing one more function called setActivitySecondsToComplete, and we have successfully obtained a reference to this function from within ActivityItem component. So whenever we select new time, we're calling this function directly to assign this new time to a particular activity object. So as we can see, this went well, and the new time was just assigned to the property SecondsToComplete of this activity object. And of course, this value will be updated every time we will select new value. And then inside of ActivityItem component, this property will be used to pre-select the value in this select box. And once we reset the time, that seconds-to-complete property is going to receive 0 value. And that's it for now. Let's keep working on the project in the next lesson.